Hey everyone, Kim McNeil, founder of Kim McNeil Yoga Inc. in Calgary, Alberta. And thanks for checking in. This is part 2 of my hip sequence for those of you who have been wanting a hip sequence for a long time. This one is addressing more of the hip in the terms of how it rotates or how it may not rotate in your case. And like I told or explained to you in part 1 of the hip sequence, we want to work on releasing certain muscles in the leg and hip by contracting other muscles. And we want to do it in a way that is going to be gentle, without forcing, without leveraging, and while maintaining a good range of motion. And like any good yogi, we want to maintain a nice, even breathing rhythm throughout. So keep those things in mind, and with this particular sequence I'll give you various options of what you can use depending on if you can stand easily. Sometimes arthritis or hip replacement when you don't have a lot of balance or we're just not able to stand for long periods of time. In terms of your flexibility in the hip, in terms of flexion and rotation, and then also sometimes it just depends on overall flexibility or even how tired we are on a particular day. So I have a couple of props with me. I have a chair and I have a wall space. So you might be able to use, only need sort of one of these or none of them at all. But I'll show you how it goes for all 3 options, okay? So the first option is a standing variation of this exercise, and it's the hardest one. So we're starting from the top and then we're kind of tweaking it as we might have limitations. So this is advanced or yoga 601, okay, when it comes to this exercise and hip release. I still like to use the chair wall for balance and to get some good traction or good alignment, excuse me, in the knee, the standing leg knee. So I take in this case, the right leg, I rotate it out and I go into what's usually considered a tree pose, okay, or vrikshasana. Now, some of you might be able to lift quite a ways up with that foot. Some of you might have to keep the toes on the floor for balance. Those are all good options. What you want to make sure that you're doing is rotating first, getting these guy muscles back here working before you lift the leg. Now, what's going to change about this tree pose is that instead of placing the foot into the inner leg, I want you to cross the leg over, or the ankle over the opposite shin. So again, for balance, you can keep your toes down, work here. If you have a bit more balance and flexibility, you can lift the foot higher. And then eventually we can even start to go into a bit of a bend in that knee and cross right over onto the thigh. Now, what we don't want to see is you reaching down, grabbing your leg, trying to place it in all these wonky positions that aren't good for you. Okay, we want to make sure that the movement happens in the hip naturally, that you're not leveraging, and that you're using your own natural range. Okay, and that these muscles are working. You're not pressing when you're here. Okay, so and then even when you're at this point, you're not pressing back into the thigh. You don't want to do any of those things. You want to make sure you get a nice rotation, feel it in the glutes and the outer thigh, get a nice cross, toes down, maybe a little bit higher, and then maybe higher still with a slight bend in the standing leg, okay? And then we want to feel as though we're pulling, in this case, the leg or the knee down to the floor, and we hold. So like sequence 1, couple breath hold is all you need, and then release. That one tends to be a bit more, a bit tiring, so you don't need to stay up with your lifted leg the entire time. But do a couple breaths, come down, and then repeat the process again. And sit back, working these guys to pull the knee down. Now, if you aren't able to go into that sort of seated position, and you're more into this sort of range, then it's not really pulling the leg down to the floor, but it's pulling the leg back. So if I had a wall behind me, we'd be pulling that leg back this way, okay? Without changing the hip position, so there's no twisting, without changing the position of the spine, so no twisting or moving that way either, okay? So, of course, wall for support, for balance if you need it, or chair. If you're using a wall, it's better to cross the leg that's furthest from the wall so that you don't bump your knee or anything like that. Okay, so just practical. So once more, the purpose of this one is to get the outer thighs, outer glutes, or glutes, certain glutes, to contract really nicely. Now, if these standing positions aren't available to you for whatever reason, right? So maybe it's too hard on your ankles or your knees, maybe the balance isn't there, or maybe you're just too far along in terms of maybe injury, or you're too fresh out of a surgery situation. So then what you can use is a chair to sit in to do the same thing. So what you want to do is make sure that you are grounded evenly in terms of your sit bones, so you're not falling forward off the chair, you're not slouching back, you have a nice neutral position. And then you could do a couple of things here, right? Rotating out slowly, crossing over that ankle, opposite ankle, straightening this leg, that tends to work well, and then we're working to pull the knee out to the side. Not so aggressively that we feel a deep stretching through here. We just want some work going on in the outer thigh to open this way, okay? Now, if you find that I have a bigger chair, it tends to drop quite a bit, but I always like firmer chairs so that you don't sink into them. But if you find you have a chair like mine, then you might want to push or bring yourself even forward to the edge so that you have more support. So again, it would be, if we're working on the right leg, we straighten it out, we rotate it, and then we bend the knee, and we place the ankle on the opposite shin, okay? And then we work these guys out here to pull the knee to the floor without any intense contraction, pulling sensation, nothing. This should be, inner thigh should be nice and quiet, okay? Now, the more advanced variation of that one, because there is more advanced variation, is to do your rotation and then pick up the foot. Now, I know I said don't use the hands, but you might just need to help out a bit to place so that it's in a comfortable position, so you're not pressing right into the knee, or you're not pressing against that ankle bone, which tends to hurt the thigh, just because we're sensitive sometimes, right? But, so that's the only reason why you would want to use your hands. And then again, we're not pressing, we're not leaning down into the leg, none of that. You can keep your spine nice and straight, keep the spine out of it, really. And then you're working these guys to pull the knee down to the floor. You can resist a bit with your hand, placing it to the outer thigh, and very gently, and I stress very gently, you'll resist into the leg with the hand, so your hand acts like a wall, or something that isn't going to move, or change resistance, right? And then your leg will gently press into the hand as it tries to pull the knee to the floor, okay? And like always, the pace is the same. So a couple breaths for the hold, then you can relax, and then do it again 3 times, switch legs, okay? So variations of what we practice in tree pose, Vrikshasana, just with more of a leg cross, and now with some flexion in the hips and the knees in the seated position. Now, how would we work the other way, right? So if we rotate, we do our little tree pose, and say we're here, and we're pulling the knee down, right? We're not moving through the hips or the spine or anything, we're just really isolating through here. Then we could potentially even add some of this, right? So as we bring the leg over, similarly to how we would maybe sit, for those of you who can do this, Gomukhasana or cow face pose, right? Where we get a nice leg cross. We'll start to feel the inner thigh contracting even here, and the outer thigh is relatively quiet. Okay, so there's no stretching sensation. So you can do this, right? 3 breath or a couple breath hold, release, even alternate. So pulling out, getting these guys to contract and hold for a few breaths, release, cross, release. Okay, so play around with that. See what you think. And if you have any questions, let me know at Kim McNeil Yoga info, at kimmcneilyoga.ca, and sign up for my newsletter at kimmcneilyoga.ca as well to get more yoga therapy tips for arthritis and for pain in general. Thanks, guys. Enjoy.